Before we begin, just one small clarification. This video was inspired by a conversation between Anupama and Dhanya Varma and some of the experiences discussed in that interview. But what we are going to talk about today goes beyond that interview. I'm going to use some of those experiences as a starting point to talk about broader patterns that can happen in relationships. Emotional control, manipulation, isolation, selective affection, and the gradual loss of your own identity. And I want to make one thing very clear. This video is not an attempt to diagnose anyone or to say that we know the complete story of somebody else's relationship. We are looking at patterns, not putting labels on people. And although we'll begin with romantic relationships, these patterns don't belong to only couples. They can happen between parents and children, siblings, friends, or even within extended family. So if you are watching this, don't watch it thinking, who is a narcissist here? Maybe a better question is, have I ever experienced something like this? Or even, could someone I know be experiencing it? That's a conversation I want to have.
Because I was scared if you would ask, how are you? And if I would start crying. Scariest question that you would have at that point is, how are you?
What kind of relationship makes a person afraid of being asked, how are you? And I don't mean that as a dramatic question. Because when we hear stories like this, I think our first reaction is usually very simple. We look at the persons who's been hurt and we think, why didn't they just leave? Or how did they not realize what was happening? Something even easier, we put a label on the other person, narcissist. And then we feel like we have understood the whole story. But relationships aren't usually that simple. And that's actually what I want to talk about today. Not one particular person, not whether somebody is narcissist or not. And not even just romantic relationship. I want to talk about patterns because sometimes something can feel wrong in a relationship for a very long time. And you still can't quite explain what it is. Maybe you have stopped meeting certain friends. Maybe you don't do certain things anymore because you already know how the other person is going to react. And the strange thing is, nobody may have actually told you to stop. You just started doing it yourself. And that's when things become really difficult to recognize. Because control doesn't always look like control. Sometimes it looks like concern. Sometimes it looks like protection. Sometimes it looks like love. And sometimes it actually feels like love. Now I want to make one thing clear before we go any further. I'm going to talk about romantic relationships quite a bit in this video because that's probably where these patterns are easiest for us to recognize. But I don't want you to think this video is only about couples because these things can happen in a lot of different relationships between parents and children, between siblings, between friends, sometimes even between adult children and their parents. And later I want to come back to that because there are some family situations where the same patterns can be surprisingly difficult to recognize. But for now, let's start with the romantic relationship because that's where we can see the pattern develop very clearly. There's one word I want to get out of the very first, narcissist. We hear it everywhere now. It's all over the internet. Someone ignores you, someone ignores your message, narcissist. Someone disagrees with you, narcissist. Someone is selfish, narcissist. Someone breaks up with you badly, definitely a narcissist. And honestly, we have reached a point where the word has almost become a general purpose insult. That's the problem because being selfish doesn't automatically make somebody a narcissist. And having one horrible argument with your partner doesn't automatically mean you are in an abusive relationship. So I'm not going to diagnose anyone in this video. I can't, and frankly, we don't need to. Because if you are sitting in a relationship that's making you miserable, the most important question isn't, is this person officially a narcissist? The more useful question is, what is this relationship doing to me? Are you becoming more confident or less? Are you becoming more yourself or less yourself? Can you disagree with this person without being punished? Can you say no? Can you maintain your friendships? Can you spend time with your family? Can you make a decision without worrying about what kind of reaction you're going to get? And perhaps the biggest question of all, do I still feel like myself when I'm around this person? Because that's what we are going to explore, not labels, patterns. And here is where it gets interesting, because emotional abuse or an unhealthy relationship doesn't necessarily begin with something that looks obviously terrible. Sometimes it begins with something, that feels really good. Someone comes to your life and they seem to understand you. They listen. They remember little things about you. They make you feel seen. They make you feel very special. And you think, finally, someone actually gets me. And maybe they do. Maybe at that moment, the relationship is completely genuine. That's the difficult part. Because when we look back at an unhealthy relationship, we tend to imagine that there must have been a giant red flag right at the beginning. Something obvious, something we should have seen. But real life usually doesn't work that way. Sometimes the thing that eventually becomes control starts out feeling like care. So let's start with something that on its own doesn't sound bad at all: idealization. In fact, if you are experiencing it, you probably don't think that there's anything wrong. You just think, wow, I finally found someone who understands me. They seem incredibly interested in you. They remember things you have said. And, they notice the little things. They make time for you. They seem to know exactly what you need. And suddenly you are not just somebody they are dating. You feel like you are the most important person in their world. And honestly, sometimes that's really beautiful. There is nothing wrong with falling deeply in love with somebody. There is nothing wrong. There is nothing wrong with making someone feel special. There is nothing wrong with being excited about new relationship. So where does the problem begins? The problem isn't necessarily the intensity. It's what comes after it. Because sometimes someone doesn't simply get to know you. They build an almost perfect version of you in their mind. You're amazing. You're different from everyone else. You're the only person who understands them. You're the only person they can trust. You are their soulmate, and you hear all of this, and naturally you feel good. Who wouldn't? But there is something else happening. You are beginning to form an emotional attachment. You are beginning to think, this person really sees me, and once you believe that, their approval starts to matter. Now, I want to be very careful here. Idealization by itself doesn't mean abuse. Someone can genuinely fall in love with you. They can genuinely think you're amazing. They can genuinely be excited about the relationship. That's normal, as I said earlier. The question is, what happens when the image they have created of you starts collide with the real you? Because eventually, you are going to disappoint them, obviously. Not because of, you have done something terrible, just because you are human. You are going to disagree with them. You are going to say no. You are going to have a bad day. You are going to want to spend time with your friends. You are going to have options they don't like. You are going to make mistakes. You are going to be you. And that's when we find out whether they fall in love with you or with the version of you they created in their head. Sometimes idealization comes with something else, something we hear a lot about these days: love bombing. Again, the word gets thrown around very easily. It's all over in the internet. The problem is when affection becomes a strategy. What it can feel like, suddenly everything is intense. Constant messages, constant attention, huge compliments, big promises. Maybe, they're talking about your future together very early. Maybe they're telling you, I never felt this way about anyone. You're different. I know from the moment I met you, you're the person I've been waiting for. And again, imagine hearing that when you're emotionally vulnerable. It feels incredible. You feel chosen, and you feel safe, and you feel wanted. But here is the question. I want you to remember, what happens when you stop giving them exactly what they want? Because that's where the difference often becomes visible. If the affection was genuine, you should still be allowed to have boundaries. You should still be allowed to say no. You should still be allowed to disagree. You should still be allowed to have your own friends, your own interest, your own life. But if the affection was being used to create dependency, things can change very quickly. Yesterday, you're the most amazing person I've ever met. Today, why didn't you answer my messages? Yesterday, I stressed you completely. Today, who were you talking to? Yesterday, I want you to be happy. Today, if you love me, you wouldn't do this. And suddenly you're confused because the person who made you feel so loved is now making you feel guilty for wanting completely normal things. And this is where something really interesting can happen. Because if someone wants to become very important in your life, one of the easiest way to do that is to make you feel like they understand you better than anyone else. They seem to know what you like. They like the same music, same movies, same food, same opinion, same dreams. They seem to have the same sense of humor. And you start thinking, how is this person so much like me? That's where our next patterns comes in. That's mirroring. So now imagine you have met someone and somehow they just seem to get you. You like the same music, you have the same sense of humor, you both love the same movies, you have the same opinion, same ambitions, same values. Even the way you look at certain things seems to be the same. And you're sitting there and thinking, how is this person so much like me? I can feel almost magical. Because when somebody seems to reflect so much of who you are, you naturally feel closer to them. You feel understood, you feel safe. You think, finally, I found my person. But here where it gets really interesting. Sometimes people naturally have a lot in common. That's normal. Two people can genuinely share the same interests and values. So just like love bombing, mirroring by itself isn't a proof of anything. That the question is what happens when you start becoming your own person inside the relationship. Because real intimacy doesn't require two people to be identical. You can love different music, have different friends, disagree about politics, want different things, and still love each other. In fact, healthy relationships have room for difference. When mirroring becomes a problem, but imagine someone seems to become whatever you want them to be. You love traveling, they love traveling. You hate a particular person, suddenly they hate them too. You have a particular opinion, I completely agree with you. You change your mind. Actually, I've always thought the same thing. And after a while, you may start feeling like you have met someone who understands you better than anyone else. Because they are constantly reflecting you back to yourself. And that's incredibly powerful. Because when somebody seems to understand you perfectly, you lower your guard. But here's the question I would ask. Who are they when you disagree with them? That's often much more revealing than how much they agree with you. Because anybody can say, you are right, I agree. We are exactly the same. But what happens when you say, no, I don't agree with you? What happens when you make a decision they don't like? What happens when you choose a friend they don't approve of? What happens when you say, I want some time alone? This is where the story changes. Because in a healthy relationship, difference doesn't necessarily threaten the relationship. You can disagree, talk about it, maybe argue, maybe even get angry and still come back to each other. You individually survive the disagreement. But in unhealthy dynamic, disagreement can suddenly feel like betrayal. How can you think that after everything I've done for you? Why do you need them? when you harm me. If you really love me, you wouldn't do this. And now we are somewhere, very different, because the relationship has moved from I understand you to you should agree with me, and eventually you should behave the way I want you to. And that's where and that's where something that initially felt like connection can slowly become control. And this, I think, is one of the hardest things to recognize, because control doesn't always sound controlling. Sometimes it sounds incredibly caring. I'm only saying this because I care about you. I don't want you to, get hurt. That friend isn't good for you. That dress is too revealing. You don't need to go there. Why do you need to work so late? Why are you talking to that person? I'm just worried about you. And any one of those sentences in isolation may not mean much. A partner can genuinely be concerned about you. They can give you advice. They can even tell you when they think you are making a mistake. That's a part of being in relationship. The question is, do you still get to make your own decision? Because there's a very simple difference. Care says, I'm worried about you. What do you think control says? I'm worried about you. So you can't do it. Care can express an opinion. Control demands obedience. Care leaves you with a choice. Control makes the choice for you. Care says, I'm here if you need me. Control says, you only need me. And sometimes the control is very subtle, that you don't even notice it happening. Maybe you start with your own clothes, then your friends, then where you go, then who you talk to, then how you spend your time, and eventually you are not even wanting for them to tell you what to do. You're already thinking about what they're gonna say to you. You see the difference? That's the moment control becomes something much more powerful, because they don't have to control your behavior anymore. You started controlling yourself. And this is where a relationship can become really exhausting, because now you are not simply living your life, you're constantly running little calculation on your head. If I say this, how will they react? If I go there, will there be an argument? If I meet this person, will they get angry? Maybe I just won't mention it. Maybe it's easiest if I don't. Maybe I will do what they want. And without anybody announcing it, your world started getting smaller. And this is where I think the relationship starts changing you in every different way, because you become really good at reading the other person's mood. The sound of their footsteps, how they close door when they are angry, the difference between their normal silence and their angry silence. You notice the tone of their voice, the way they look at you, even the way they put their phone down, and before they have actually said anything, you already know something is wrong. And the first question that comes in your head isn't what's wrong with them, it's what did I do? You start choosing your words carefully. You think twice before asking for something. You don't bring up certain topics. You don't mention certain people. Maybe you don't tell them about something you did, because you already know how they're going to react. Maybe you cancel plans before they even know you had plans. Maybe you apologize even when you're not completely sure what you did wrong. Not because you necessarily agree with them, because you want to avoid what comes next. You're no longer making decisions based simply on what you want. You are making decisions based on the reaction you are trying to avoid. What do I want become how will they react? And here's the strange part. Nobody may have actually told you you're not allowed to do this. There may be no written rule, no explicit threat, no big confrontation. You just know what will happen if you do it, and so you don't do it. That's why I call it emotional risk management. You are constantly calculating, if I say this, what happens? If I go there, what happens? If I disagree, what happens? If I tell them the truth, what happens? And eventually, you stop asking what you want. You start asking what will keep the peace. Some cat is making some noise there. Alright, but is it that normal? Okay, let's continue. Let him make. Now somebody might hear this and say, but every relationship has argument. Absolutely. Of course, we all agree they do. People disagree, people get angry, people have bad days. Sometimes you say something stupid and hurt someone you love. That's not automatically abuse. We are all, after all, we are all human. The difference is what happens after the disagreement. Can you talk about it? Can you apologize? Can both people say I was wrong? Can you disagree without being afraid? Can you still be yourself afterwards? Then, or does every disagreement teach you the same lesson? Don't do that again. Don't say that again. Don't bring that up. Don't make them angry. Because if you are constantly modifying yourself to prevent somebody else's reaction, there's no longer just conflict management. You have started living around their emotions. That's really sad. And once someone learns that you will change your behavior to avoid their reaction, another pattern can appear. That's punishment. I'm not necessarily talking about physical punishment, physical abuse. Sometimes the punishment is incredibly quiet. Silence, withdrawal, coldness, ignoring you, withholding affection, refusing to speak to you, suddenly behaving as though you don't exist. And the interesting thing is, sometimes you don't even know what you are being punished for. Imagine you come home, something feels different. You say, what's wrong? Nothing. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. But they're clearly not fine. And how now you are sitting there talking, trying to work it out. What happened? Was it something I said? Was it, something I did? Did I forget something? Should I apologize? And maybe eventually, you do that. Not because you know what you did, just because you want the silence to end. And that teaches you something. It teaches you that when this person is unhappy, you are responsible for making the unhappiness go away. So you adapt. You become more careful. You monitor their mood. You apologize faster. You stop bringing up certain things, certain issues. You give up little pieces of yourself because it's easier. At least that's what you tell yourself. It's not worth the argument. I will just let it go. They are stressed. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. I will deal with it later. And sometimes that later never comes. But here's where relationships like this can become incredibly confusing. Because if someone treated you badly all the time, eventually living would probably become much easier. You will look at the relationship and think, this is hurting me, this is hurting me. But what if they are not horrible all the time? What if sometimes they are wonderful? One day they are distant, the next day they are incredibly affectionate. One day they are angry, the next day they are apologizing. One day they make you feel completely alone, and then suddenly they make you feel like the most loved person in the world. And this is something people on the outside often don't understand. They might say, if they are treating you so badly, why are you still there? But they didn't see what happened yesterday. They didn't see the apology. They didn't see the flowers. They didn't see the hug. They didn't see the night. When everything felt perfect again, they didn't see the person you fell in love with. And that's important, because the good moments don't necessarily cancel out the bad ones. Sometimes the good memories are what keeps you waiting for the next good moment. So instead of thinking, should I leave? You are thinking, maybe, things will get back to how they were. Maybe they are under stress. Maybe I can fix this. Maybe I just need to be more patient. Maybe if I change something about myself. And that's where people can become trapped in a cycle. Not because they are stupid, not because they are weak, and not because they enjoy being treated badly, because they are still attached to the good version of the relationship. And now something else can happen. The relationship starts becoming smaller. Your friends become a problem, your family becomes a problem, the people who knew you before the relationship somehow become a threat to it, and eventually and gradually the person you're the most emotionally dependent on becomes the person you're spending most of your time with. That's where we get another very important pattern: isolation. It doesn't always look like somebody saying you are not allowed to see your friends. Sometimes it's much quieter than that. It can, if I bring an example, like, I don't really like that friend. They don't understand your relationship. Why you tell them everything? Why do you need to spend so much time with them? Shouldn't be enough for each other? Any one of those sentences by itself doesn't necessarily, mean anything terrible. Couples can have a disagreement about friends. Partners can genuinely dislike someone. Someone can have difficult relationship with their in-laws. That's normal. The question is, what happens over time? Maybe you stop talking to that one friend because it's easier than having another argument. Then maybe you stop telling your family certain things because you don't want to, you don't want them to hear. You don't want to hear, I told you so. Then you stop going out as much. Then you start spending almost all of your free time with this one person, and slowly your world gets smaller. Not necessarily because somebody physically locked you inside the house, not necessarily because they said you are forbidden from seeing these people. Sometimes you simply stop seeing them because you have learned what happens when you do. And this is where something really strange can happen. You may actually believe you are choosing it. I don't really need those friends anymore. My family doesn't understand me. We just like spending time together. It's easier this way. And maybe at some level, you genuinely believe that. But if you look back at your life before this relationship, how many people were there? How many places did you go? What did you enjoy doing? Who could you call when something went wrong? And now, who do you have? Because if one person has gradually becomes your partner, your best friend, your emotional support, your social life, your source of approval, and sometimes even your connection to the outside world, that's an enormous amount of power for one person to have. And sometimes the isolation is described as loyalty. It's us against the world. It sounds romantic, doesn't it? Almost like proof that your relationship is special. But there's a very important difference between we support each other and we only need each other. A healthy relationship should add people to your life. It should give you room to maintain your friendship, your family, your interests, your individuality. You should be able to love someone deeply without having to disappear from everyone else. Because once you are isolated, something else changes. The person you are dependent on becomes your main source of information about the relationship. If they tell you your friends are jealous of us, you don't have many people left to change that idea. If they tell you your family is trying to turn you against me, you may not have enough outside perspective to question it. And if they tell you you are imagining things that never happened, you're too sensitive, you are remembering it wrong, where do you go back and check? That's when isolation can create the perfect environment for another pattern: gaslighting. Gaslighting is another word we hear everywhere, and just like narcissism is often used too casually. Somebody remembers an argument differently from you. That's not automatically gaslighting. Two people can genuinely remember the same event differently. People misunderstand things. People forget things. People interrupt situation differently. That's normal. Gaslighting is different. The problem is not simply that someone disagrees with you, with your memory. The problem is when someone repeatedly make you doubt your own perception of reality. You said this yesterday. They say, I've never said that, but I remember you saying it. You are imagining things. You were angry with me. I wasn't angry. You're too sensitive. You hurt me. You're always making, yourself the victim. This keeps happening. And maybe the first few times, you argue back. No, I know what happened. But imagine hearing this again and again and again. Eventually, something changes. You stop saying, no, 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 that's true. That's not true. And you start saying, maybe. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I was too emotional. Maybe I'm remembering it wrong. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe the problem really is me. And that's a really dangerous part. Because the person doesn't necessarily have to convince you of a completely different reality. They just have to make you stop trusting your own, I know what happened, to maybe I'm wrong. And now remember what we just talked about. If you have already become isolated, if you stop talking to your friends, if you stop, telling your family what's happening, then you have fewer outside perspectives. Fewer people say, wait, that doesn't sound, right. Fewer people say, that's not how I remember it, how I remember that incident. Fewer people who can simply look at the situation from outside. So only version of your reality you're hearing, maybe coming from the person you're beginning to doubt. But here is where things become really complicated. Because what if you still love this person? What if they aren't horrible every day? What if they are good memories? What if they are, they have apologized? What if they have promised to change? What if sometimes you genuinely feel happy with them? And at the same time, something isn't right. How do you hold those two things in your head at the same time? This person loves me, and this person is hurting me. I know what happened, and maybe I'm imagining it. I want to leave, but what if things get better? Your brain tried to find another explanation. Maybe they're just stressed. Maybe I caused it. Maybe I'm expecting too much. Maybe every relationship is like this. Maybe if I become more patient, maybe if I change, then... And there is something very human about this, because admitting that someone you love is hurting you means you also have to confront the possibility that the relationship you have invested so much of yourself in isn't what you thought it was. And that's a very painful thing to accept. And this is where I want to slow down a bit, because by this point, something much bigger has happened. What happens when you start losing yourself? And this time, for me, is where the whole thing becomes much more serious. Because at the beginning, you were worried about the relationship. Then you were worried about that reaction. Then you were worried about keeping this peace. And somewhere along the way, you stopped worrying about yourself. You don't quite remember when it happened. There wasn't necessarily one dramatic moment. It just slowly became a smaller version of yourself. Think about your life before the relationship. What were you like? Were you more confident? Did you have more friends? Did you laugh more? Did you travel? Did you have hobbies? Did you speak your mind? Did you make decisions without constantly checking whether somebody else would approve? And now compare that person with the person you are today. Maybe you are stopped talking to certain people. Maybe you don't wear certain clothes. Maybe you have stopped talking about certain subjects. Maybe you don't express your opinion the way you used to. Maybe you apologize more. Maybe you explain yourself more. Maybe you constantly wonder whether you have done something wrong. Then, and perhaps the stronger part is, you have become very good at being the person this relationship needs you to be. You know what I mean? You start editing yourself before you speak. Should I say this? Before I go somewhere, will I be okay with this? Before you meet someone, is this going to cause a problem? Before you make a decision, what will they think? And eventually, you don't even notice that you're doing it anymore. It just becomes automatic. That's when I think we need to ask very uncomfortable question. Am I still making choices, or am I managing somebody else's emotions? Because your identity isn't just your name. It's not your job. It's not your relationship status. It's all those little things that makes you. The people you love, the things you are interested in, the opinions you have, the way you spend your time, the things that make you laugh. And when a relationship slowly takes those things away from you, you must still look at completely normal from the outside. You are going to work, you are answering phone calls, you are going to family functions, you are posting pictures, you are smiling when somebody asks, how are you? But inside, something has changed. This is why Anupama's words hit differently now. And this is where I want to bring us back to something Anupama said at the beginning.
Every part of me was dead. I stopped looking at people. I stopped looking into their eyes. I stopped smiling.
I stopped smiling. I stopped looking at people. My mood would be based on someone else's mood. At the beginning of this video, there were just 3 very sad sentences. But now we have spent some time looking at what can happen underneath them. Control, self-policing, walking on eggshells, punishment, isolation, gaslighting, doubting yourself, and eventually losing pieces of who you are. One bad day doesn't define a relationship, and one bad argument doesn't define a person. What we are talking about is something different, a repeated pattern. A pattern where one person increasingly has to change, while the other person increasingly gets to decide what is acceptable. The question I want you to remember, so forget the label for a moment. Forget the word narcissist. Forget whether somebody fits some checklist on the internet. Just ask yourself, what happens to me when I'm around this person? Do I feel safe being honest? Can I disagree? Can I say no? Can I have my own friends? Can I spend time with my family? Can I make a mistake without being humiliated? Can I change my mind? Can I be happy without worrying that my happiness will somehow upset them? And maybe the biggest question, do I feel more like myself in the relationship or less like myself? Why don't I just leave? And honestly, that's one of the most unfair questions we ask people who are stuck in those kind of difficult relationships. Because from the outside, leaving can look incredibly simple. Pack a bag, walk out, it's over. But inside the relationship, it's really that simple. Because by the time somebody reaches, this point, they're not just leaving a person, they are leaving a life. Maybe there are like children, maybe there's a financial dependence, maybe they have stopped working, maybe they have moved to different cities, maybe the entire social circle has disappeared. Maybe their family doesn't support the decision. Maybe they're afraid of what happens after they leave. Maybe they have been told for years, nobody else will love you. You won't survive without me. Your family doesn't want you. Everyone will blame you. And then there's something else, hope. Hope that, this time will be different. Hope this thing will change. Hope that the apology is genuine. Hope that this person you will fall in love with will come back. Hope that if you just explain yourself properly, they will finally understand. And sometimes that hope keeps people there far longer than anybody on the outside can understand. The question, why didn't you leave? So when somebody says, why didn't you just leave? Maybe the better question is, what made you leaving so difficult? What had this person lost? Their money? Their friends, their confidence, their family, their sense of reality, their belief that they could, manage on their own. Then because sometimes the relationship doesn't just make you afraid of leaving, it makes you believe you can't leave. And that's a very different thing. And remember what I said right at the beginning, that this isn't only about romantic relationship, because everything we have just talked about, control, dependency, selective affection, isolation, making somebody feel like, they need you, can happen inside a family too. And sometimes it can be even harder to recognize there, because when the person controlling you is your mother or your father or your sibling, you don't necessarily think, I need to get out of this relationship. You think, but they are my family. This is where I want to be very careful, because families are very complicated. A mother loving her daughter deeply is not a problem. A mother wanting to perfect her daughter is not a problem. A mother wanting to help when her daughter is going through a difficult time, that's love. And many families, that kind of support is absolutely necessary. So I'm not talking about a mother who says, I'm here for my daughter. I'm talking about what can happen when that sentence slowly changes meaning. When I'm here for my daughter becomes my daughter is mine, and then eventually less is us against everyone else. and that can happen without anybody announcing it. It can happen very gradually, and because we are talking about a mother and a daughter, people may even interpret as something beautiful. Look how close they are. She'll do anything for her daughter, but a caring mother. But sometimes closeness can become control. Imagine a mother comes to live with her daughter and her daughter's family, and first she's helping, she's cooking, she's looking after the grandchildren, she's making the life easier for her daughter, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's what families often do for each other. But then something begins to change. She doesn't just to help in the kitchen anymore. She takes over the kitchen, what gets cooked, when it gets cooked, how it gets cooked, who eats what, and slowly the kitchen starts feeling like a shared space. It becomes her territory. And then you notice something else. The affection isn't distributed equally. She is incredibly warm with her daughter. She cooks specially for her. She takes care of her. She gives her extra attention. She tells her, "You don't have to worry, I'm here." And again, none of that sounds terrible. That's the mother loving her daughter. And that's actually the thread connecting everything we have talked about. Romantic relationships, friendships, parents and children. The details may change, but the underlying pattern can be remarkably similar. Control, dependency, isolation, selective affection, fear of disagreement, and slowly the loss of your own voice. So the question isn't simply, is this person toxic? The more important question is, what happens to my freedom when I am around them? Let's forget the labels for a moment. Forget narcissist, forget toxic, forget whatever diagnosis you saw on Instagram yesterday. Let's ask some much simpler question. This is probably one of the simplest tests I can think of. Can you say no? Not aggressively, not disrespectfully. Just no, I don't want to do that. What happens? Are they disappointed? That's normal. Are they angry for a while? That's really human. Do you talk about it later? That's relationship. But what if saying no means you get punished? You lose attraction, you lose affection, you get the silent treatment, you are made to feel guilty, you are threatened with abandonment. Or suddenly you are told, after everything I've done for you, then the issue isn't really the thing you said no to. The issue is whether you are allowed to have boundary. The second question is similar. Can you disagree with this person and still feel safe? Because you don't have to agree with the person you love. Actually, I would argue that a healthy relationship needs room for disagreement. Two people can look at exactly the same situation and see it differently. That's okay. The question is, what happens when you say, I don't see it that way? Can you have a conversation? Or disagreement immediately becomes disrespect. Does it become you don't appreciate me? You are against me, you are choosing them over me. If you love me, you would agree with me. Because if agreement is the price of love, that's not really freedom. This one is really important. Do you still have your own life? Your friends, your family, your interests, your work, your private conversations, your own time, your own opinions. You don't have to spend every weekend with your family. You don't have to tell your family everything. And obviously, relationships require compromises. That's normal. But if maintaining a relationship, maintaining a connection with other people repeatedly creates fear, if you had to hide friendship, if you had to ask permission to see your own family, if you are constantly being made to choose, that's something worth paying attention to. Here's another one. Can you tell this person the truth? Even when the truth isn't what they want to hear. Can you say, I'm unhappy. I don't like what happened. You hurt me. I need some space. I don't agree with you. I want something different. Or do you spend half an hour, rehearsing it in your head, the sentence, because you are terrified of their reaction? Because if you are constantly preparing for somebody else's emotional explosion, you're not really communicating anymore. You're managing them. This one is particularly important when we are talking about families. Is love still there when you disappoint them? What happens when you make a decision they don't like? What happens when you choose your spouse instead of your parent? What happens when you choose your children? What happens when you say, I love you, but I'm going to do this differently? Does the relationship survive your independence? Or does the affection suddenly disappear? Because unconditional love doesn't mean I love you as long as you obey me. It means you can become your own person, but I can still love you. And here's another thing I would look at: who's actually gets to make decision. Is it a discussion, or is it the one person preference automatically is the final answer? Where you live, what you eat, who you meet, what to buy, how you spend money, how you raise your children, where you go, what you wear. Compromises is let's find something that works for both of us. Control is we are doing what I want. I'm gonna make you feel bad until you accept it. And then ask yourself this one question: do you speak more freely or less? Do you trust yourself, or are you constantly checking with someone else? Do you make decisions, or do you wait for permission? Do you have more people in your life or fewer? And if you look at yourself honestly, do you recognize the person you have become? Now I want to stop here for a second, because there's a danger in making videos like this. You can watch 10 minutes or something like this, recognize 3 things your partner does, and suddenly think, oh my God, I'm in an abusive relationship. Maybe you are, but maybe you are not. Maybe you are in a relationship where both of you have communications problem. Maybe you have both developed unhealthy habits. Maybe you are going through a difficult period. Maybe somebody is struggling with something you don't know about. We don't have enough information to make that argument from a YouTube video. And that's why I keep coming back to the word pattern. Somebody loses their temper once. That's a problem. It doesn't automatically define the entire relationship. Somebody says something cruel during an argument, that's hurtful. But it doesn't automatically tell us everything about them. But when something happens repeatedly, when the same behavior keeps producing, the same result, when one person keeps gaining more power, while the other person keeps losing more freedom, now we are looking at a pattern. And there's one framework that I think make all of this much easier to understand. Don't just ask what they do. Ask what happened to the balance of power. Did you become more dependent on them? Did they become less dependent on you? Did your world become smaller? Did their world stay the same? Did their feeling become more important than yours? Did their need become the family's priority? Did you start changing your behavior to keep them happy? Because when you put all those things together, you begin to see something. This isn't really about one argument, it's about who is allowed to have voice. And maybe you're watching this and thinking, okay, I'm recognizing some of this, so what now? And I want to be very careful here too, because the internet loves giving people very simple advice: leave, cut them off, go, no contact, block them. Sometimes those things may be necessary, especially when somebody is in serious danger, but real life isn't always that simple. And sometimes you can't just walk away tomorrow. Maybe it's your parent, maybe you are financially dependent, maybe you work together, maybe you're caring for somebody, maybe walking away would affect 10 other people. So perhaps the first step isn't leaving. Perhaps the first step is seeing clearly. Start noticing the pattern. Not they are horrible, but what exactly happened, what was said, what happened before, how did I respond? Because when you are living inside a confusion, details become incredibly important. Then start asking, what do I actually want? Not what will keep them happy, not what will avoid an argument, not what your family expect, not what your partner expect. What do I want? And maybe it's been a very long time since you have asked yourself that question. And if you have become isolated, start rebuilding your connections. One friend, one family member, one person you trust. You don't have to tell them the entire life story. You don't have to, convince them that somebody is evil. Because sometimes the first thing you need isn't advice, it's perspective. And this one is very difficult. If you are dealing with someone who constantly turns every conversation into a battle, you may eventually realize that proving your point isn't actually helping you. You don't have to win every argument. You don't have to convince them that they are wrong. You don't have to make them admit what they did. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is understand the pattern and decide what you are going to do about it. And if you're genuinely afraid of somebody, financial control, threats involving children, stalking, or you simply don't feel safe, this is bigger than a YouTube video. Please don't try to solve something dangerous completely on your own. Talk to someone you trust and seek appropriate professional or local support, because recognizing a pattern is important, but staying safe is more important. And this brings me back to the question we started with: how are you? So maybe the next time somebody asks you, how are you? Don't automatically say, I'm fine. Take a second and actually ask yourself, how am I? What has this relationship done to me? And perhaps most importantly, am I still allowed to be myself? Someday, the first step out of a difficult relationship isn't leaving, is finally seeing it differently, clearly.